In the Middle Ages, a church bell was never just a sound. It could mean prayer, curfew, fire, plague, death, or a storm rolling toward the village. For medieval people, every ringing carried a message and sometimes a warning they were afraid to understand. Tonight, we step into a world of cold stone towers, candlelit churches, muddy streets, and bronze bells echoing through the dark. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy calm medieval history for sleep, study, and relaxation. Now, settle in, dim the lights, and let the bells of the Middle Ages carry us into the night. Hey guys! Tonight you find yourself at the foot of a walled town in the Middle Ages, with cold stone rising before you, damp straw clinging to your boots, smoke lying under the rafters of distant houses, and the first church bell rolling through the river mist like a great bronze animal waking in the dark. Your cloak smells of wet wool, your fingers ache from the road, and the breath of tired horses hangs white in the winter air beside the gate. Somewhere above, torchlight shivers along the battlements, and below, mud has made a very personal friendship with your ankles. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. You probably would not last a week out here, especially once you discover that supper may be mostly pottage, stale bread, and someone's confident opinion about leeches. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the bell fades into the evening, you may comment where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge closer to the gate while the bell's last note trembles in the air. It does not simply stop. It thins. It wanders. It sinks into the puddles and the wagon ruts and the black wooden wheels of a cart waiting ahead of you. The whole town seems to have breathed with it. A woman carrying a bundle of kindling pauses until the sound is gone. A boy with a basket of onions crosses himself. Even the dog nosing at the ditch lifts its head, as though it knows the bell means something more than metal struck by iron. The gatehouse smells of wet timber, old smoke, and the sour closeness of travellers who have been wrapped in the same cloaks too long. An iron-studded oak door stands open just wide enough for carts and latecomers, but the guards do not hurry. They sit beneath a smoky torch, their helmets pushed back, one eating from a wooden bowl, and the other warming his hands above a brazier where the coals glow dull red. Beside them hangs a small handbell used for warning the tower above, though it looks less grand than the church bell and much more likely to be misplaced under a sack of turnips. You wait while a merchant argues over the market toll. He's brought smoked fish, coarse salt, and a little barrel of dried figs he insists are finer than any in the county, though no one present appears willing to risk money on such a daring claim. The guard asks his fee. The merchant sighs like a man wounded in battle, and behind them the town bell gives one smaller aftersound, a faint shiver from the tower, as if the bronze itself is remembering. No one can quite agree whether the bell above the parish church is old enough to have rung for the last great sickness, or whether that is merely what people say when they want strangers to listen. The guard nearest you says it was cast by a wandering founder who put a saint's medal into the molten metal. The merchant says that is nonsense, because his uncle knew a man whose cousin saw silver scraped from the bell's rim during a famine. A third traveller, hood drawn low, murmurs that bells are never only bells. They are mouths. They speak for the church, for the dead, for fire, for storm, for curfew, for the Lord's command, and sometimes, if the night is wrong, for things best left unnamed. This seems an excessive burden for one object, but then, medieval objects often have more responsibilities than anyone has wisely planned. You pass beneath the archway as the guards wave you through. The stones above you are slick with damp. A carved saint, softened by rain and age, looks down from a niche with a face so worn that he appears less holy than mildly concerned. You understand the feeling. Beyond the gate, the town narrows into a lane of leaning houses, upper stories jutting over the street until the strip of sky becomes a dark ribbon. Rushes and straw lie scattered near doorways to soak up mud and less pleasant things. And you quickly decide not to investigate the mixture too carefully. A baker's oven breathes warmth from somewhere ahead. A tanner's yard contributes its own opinion from behind a fence. A woman shakes a cloth from an upper window, and you step aside with the speed of a person learning wisdom. The bell has quieted now, but its authority remains. Doors close more firmly, voices lower, a few late traders pack away cloth, pots, and small pewter badges shaped like saints and shells, the sort pilgrims pin to hats and cloaks so everyone can see where they have been, or where they claim to have been, which is nearly as useful in certain alehouses. At a stall beside a shuttered booth, an old man sells charms made of thread, bone, and tiny scraps of written prayer. Some swear that a knot tied while a bell is ringing can keep fever from a child or sour luck from a household. Others say it only keeps coins from staying in your purse. Even now, it is hard to tell whether belief begins in hope, fear, habit, or simply the need to do something when the world feels wide and cold. You follow the lane toward the parish church, its tower rising above roofs like a dark finger against the last ash-blue light. The building is not as grand as a cathedral, but here it is the heart of everything. Its stones hold the day's heat poorly, yet people look to it as if warmth must come from there. The bell inside its tower has marked work, prayer, danger, death, and return for longer than many villagers have been alive. It has told them when to wake, when to kneel, when to close the gates, when to fear flames, and when to gather for news that may not improve anyone's evening. You pause near a horse trough filled with ice at the edges. The dog from the ditch has somehow followed you inside and now stands beside your boot as if the two of you have arranged this partnership formally. He is thin, brown, and confident, with the expression of a creature who knows every kitchen door in town. When the tower gives a low creak in the wind, his ears twitch, your own shoulders tighten. It is only wood shifting, rope moving, bronze cooling after the stroke. Yet in this place sound travels with old meanings attached to it. A woman in a fur-lined cloak passes with a covered basket. She sees you looking up and gives a small nod toward the tower. Best hear it than not, she says. Not quite to you, not quite to herself. Then she hurries on, her pattens clacking over the stones. You carry her words with you. Best hear it than not, in a town of thatch, smoke, sickness, hunger, thieves, weather, and sudden orders from men with seals and swords. The bell is warning and comfort together. It frightens because it matters. It matters because people cannot ignore it. You turn from the trough and follow the smell of ale and hearth smoke toward a low guest house near the churchyard wall. A half-burned beeswax candle glows behind a horn window. Somewhere inside, bowls are being set out, benches dragged, wet cloaks shaken loose. The bell's silence settles over the street like another layer of evening. Above you, the tower waits, dark and patient, holding its neck sound in the cold bronze of its throat. You wake before you mean to, 'cause the bell wakes first. For a moment, you do not know where you are. The room is dark except for a thin coal glow under the hearth ash and the uncertain yellow bead of that half-burned beeswax candle, now guttering low on a shelf near the door. You lie beneath a wool blanket that smells of smoke, lanolin, and many travellers who have made peace with being damp. Straw pricks through the bedding beneath your shoulder, somewhere near your feet. The brown dog has chosen a place for himself and is snoring with the innocent authority of a small abbot. Then the bell sounds again. One deep stroke rolls from the church tower across the churchyard wall, through the guest house shutters, into the beams above you. The note is not loud in the way a shout is loud. It is larger than that, slower, more patient. It enters the room like cold air. It touches the bowls stacked on the table, the iron keys hanging from the innkeeper's belt, the sleeping shapes of other travellers bundled along the wall. A pilgrim mutters under his breath. A carter turns over and pulls his cloak across his face. The dog opens one eye, decides the world is not yet worth managing, and returns to sleep. You listen for another stroke. It comes after a pause long enough for you to think perhaps you imagined the first, then a third. The monastery beyond the town, farther up the river road, answers faintly with a lighter bell of its own, thinner and more silver, as if the dark countryside itself is counting. This is how the hours move here. Not by a clock face hanging neatly above a mantle, not by little hands circling politely as if time were a trained mouse, but by sound falling from towers into fields and streets. The bell does not ask whether you are ready. It announces. It divides the night into prayer and labour, into permitted sleep and expected wakefulness. It tells monks when to rise from pallets in cold dormitories, scribes when to leave their ink-dark desks, bakers when to stir embers, watchmen when to change their rounds, and ordinary tired bodies when the day is beginning whether the body agrees or not. No one can quite agree whether the first bell of the morning belongs to God, the abbot, the parish priest, or the poor soul who must pull the rope in the cold. Perhaps it belongs to all of them. Perhaps that is why people fear it. A bell is never merely heard by one person. It gathers everyone into the same moment. It makes private weariness public. You sit up slowly, careful not to knock your head against a low beam. Your breath shows faintly. The guest house room has a packed earth floor strewn with rushes, though last night's rushes have already collected crumbs, boot mud, and one mysterious object that may be a bean, a bead, or a sign that breakfast should be approached cautiously. On a peg near the hearth hangs a small bunch of dried herbs, rosemary, rue, and perhaps a little vervain. The innkeeper's wife tied it there. She told you the night before to sweeten the air and keep ill humours from settling. Some swear that rue hung near a doorway discourages witches, fever, and bad dreams. Others swear it only discourages guests with delicate noses. A monk sits awake at the far bench, already dressed, his hood shadowing his face. You remember seeing him last night near the door, thin as a candle wick, with ink stains around his fingernails and a habit patched at the elbow. He warms his hands around a wooden cup of small ale, the weak morning drink that serves where water is not always trusted. His eyes lift toward the sound of the bell, and he crosses himself without hurry. You do the same, or nearly the same, though your gesture may not satisfy anyone trained in proper devotion. The monk notices, but he is kind enough not to correct your technique. Medieval courtesy sometimes means allowing a stranger to be spiritually untidy before dawn. The innkeeper rises from behind a hanging cloth and begins the work of mourning. She stirs the hearth, sends sparks turning upward, and lays coarse bread near the embers to warm. Soon the room fills with the smell of smoke, ale, damp wool, and yesterday's pottage thickened for another meal. Nothing is wasted here unless it has already fought bravely and lost. A wooden trencher is set before you, slightly warped, carrying bread, a smear of soft cheese, and a spoonful of onions cooked until they have surrendered. It is not a feast, but it is warm enough to feel merciful. Outside, the bell continues its pattern, and you begin to understand its power. A rooster may crow, but a rooster cannot order a town. A lord may command, but his voice does not reach every cottage at once. The bell crosses walls, ditches, frost, shutters, sleep, and doubt. It enters the ears of the high and low alike, though what it means to each of them is not the same. To the monk, it may mean prayer; to the baker, labour; to the debtor, a court day approaching; to a widow, the memory of another bell rung slowly at night. To a child, perhaps only the knowledge that warm bedding is about to be taken away, a cruelty felt keenly in every century. Those who tell the tale never fully agree on when bells first began to rule the day so completely. Some say the monasteries taught the villages to hear time. Some say villages were already listening to older sounds: cock-crow, cattle lowing, the creak of mill wheels, the rising wind, the call of watchmen. Yet the bell makes all those scattered signs official. It gives time a bronze body and hangs it over everyone's head. You finish your bread while the monk rises. He takes a small leather satchel from beneath the bench. A corner of parchment peeks from inside, and you glimpse lines written in a careful hand, dark and cramped as winter branches. He is bound, he says quietly, for the monastery after prime, and you may walk that way if your road allows. The innkeeper warns that the lane beyond the east gate is slick, and a cart broke a wheel there yesterday. The dog lifts his head at the word walk, which appears to be the only bell he truly obeys. You step outside with the monk as the town brightens reluctantly. Frost rims the trough. Smoke rises in blue ropes from chimney holes. A baker's boy carries a tray of loaves beneath a cloth, moving as solemnly as if he bears relics, which, before breakfast, he nearly does. The church tower stands above you, its bell now quiet again, but not absent. You feel the sound still lingering in the bones of the street. Ahead, beyond the crooked roofs, another bell answers from the monastery, and you begin walking toward it. You move with the monk through lanes that are still half asleep, though the town itself is beginning to loosen and creak around you like an old cart preparing for a difficult road. Shutters open with wooden groans, smoke thickens above roof lines. Somewhere a woman beats dust from a hanging cloth with such firm purpose that you suspect the cloth has offended her family for generations. The brown dog trots ahead of you, tail lifted, as if he has been appointed town guide by an authority no one else recognizes. The market square waits at the heart of the town, broad by medieval standards, which means only that two carts may pass one another if both drivers are charitable, and one horse has a philosophical nature. Around its edges stand timbered houses with sagging upper floors, a stone cross darkened by weather, and a covered well whose rope is stiff with frost. Rushes lie trampled near the ale-seller's booth. A fishmonger arranges smoked eels on a board. A woman with red hands sets out coarse loaves, oat cakes, and small hard cheeses wrapped in cloth. The smell is rich and tangled bread, damp wool, onions, horse sweat, cold iron, old straw, and the sharp salt breath of fish. Above all of it rises the church tower. The bell has not rung again since you left the guest house, but every person in the square seems to know it may do so at any moment. That is the strange thing. Its silence has weight. It hangs over bargaining and gossip, over the clink of coins, over the scrape of baskets on stone. People glance upward without meaning to. A bell in a medieval town is like a watchman who does not need legs. It waits, and everyone waits with it. The monk walks slowly, not because he is frail, but because he is used to noticing things. His sandals are dark with mud at the edges, and his ink-stained fingers are tucked into his sleeves. He points with his chin toward a narrow table where a clerk has set up beside the market reeve. The clerk's wax tablets lie open, ready to record tolls, fines, and the names of people who would rather not have their names recorded. Every cart that enters with goods must pay. Every measure of grain must be fair, at least in theory, which is a phrase doing heroic work in many markets. A small handbell rings near the toll table. It is not the deep church bell, only a bright, sharp clatter from the reeve's assistant. But the sound cuts through the square. A farmer leading 2 geese on a cord flinches. The geese object to existence in general. The assistant calls for all sellers of grain to come forward for measuring, and the crowd shifts with a weary obedience. This little bell does not speak of heaven or storm or death, yet people still fear it a little. It means payment. It means attention. It means someone in authority has remembered that you are standing there with goods, pockets, and possibly unpaid obligations. No one can quite agree whether market bells were invented to keep order or to remind poor folk that order usually comes with a fee. The merchant from last night, the one with the dried figs, stands under a striped cloth canopy, arranging his wares with the wounded dignity of a man still recovering from tolls. He sees you and gives a nod, then immediately turns to tell a passing woman that his figs are so sweet they might soften a bishop's temper. She replies that she has met bishops and doubts the claim. You linger by the bread stall while the square grows louder. Pottage simmers in a blackened pot near an alewife's booth, thick with barley, leeks, and something that may once have known a pig. Wooden bowls stack beside it. A basket of trenchers rests under a cloth. The monk accepts a small piece of warm bread from the baker's wife, offers a blessing in return, and receives a second piece, which suggests that holiness, when properly applied, can be practical before noon. Then the great bell rings. 1 stroke. The square stills almost at once. It is not the hour bell from dawn. This stroke is firmer, spaced differently, with a command inside it. Another follows, then another. Heads turn toward the church porch, where a town officer steps onto the stones with a parchment in hand. The bell is being used to gather ears. You feel the change in the crowd. Bargaining pauses. A child is pulled closer to her mother's skirts. A butcher wipes his hands on his apron and listens. The fishmonger covers his eels, perhaps out of respect, perhaps because crows have been watching with unacceptable interest. The officer reads in a loud voice that the west gate will close early because of trouble on the road, that all strangers must lodge within known houses or approved inns, that no fire is to be left uncovered after curfew, and that anyone selling short measure will answer before the court. The bell has turned the square into one body. It has drawn people from private errands into public duty, and because duty rarely arrives bearing cakes, unease passes from face to face. Some swear that a bell rung for proclamation carries the truth farther than a human voice can carry lies. Others say this is nonsense, since plenty of lies have travelled very comfortably beneath church bells. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people trust the bell because it is sacred, because it is loud, or because refusing to trust it can become expensive. When the officer finishes, the bell sounds once more. The crowd exhales. Market life begins again, though changed. People talk in lower tones. The early closing of the west gate means delayed carts, missed bargains, and travellers pressed into town for the night. A woman buying salt mutters that trouble on the road could mean bandits, soldiers, wolves, unpaid men from a lord's quarrel, or simply one nervous reeve with too much parchment. Those who tell the tale never fully agree until the tale is old enough to become useful. You move past stalls where little superstitions nest among ordinary goods. A peddler sells tin bells no larger than acorns, meant to be tied to a horse harness to keep away ill luck on the road. Beside him, a woman offers red thread for tying around a child's wrist against the evil eye. A barber surgeon displays clean razors, cupping glasses, and a jar of leeches with the proud expression of a man presenting fine jewels. The leeches look less proud, though perhaps they are modest by nature. The monk pauses near the barber's table and speaks quietly with him about a brother at the monastery who has a swelling in the neck. The barber recommends a poultice of mallow and warm ale, then leeches if that fails, then prayer if the leeches become personally disappointing. Medieval medicine, you begin to notice, often believes in giving both herbs and heaven a fair chance. Another bell rings, smaller and quicker, from the far side of the square. This one comes from a chapel near the fish stalls. A priest raises a little handbell as he carries a covered vessel toward a sickbed nearby. People make way at once. Some kneel briefly in the mud. Others bow their heads. A few cross themselves with sudden fear, because the bell tells them holiness is passing, but also that sickness is close. Here again, comfort and dread walk under the same cloak. You follow at a respectful distance until the priest disappears into a narrow lane. The dog follows too, though with less respect and more interest in the possibility of dropped bread. Behind you, the market resumes, but the sound of the small bell remains in your ear like a silver thread. The monk turns toward the east gate, where your road will lead toward the monastery. Before you leave the square, you look back once at the tower. Its stones are pale now in the morning light. The bell inside is hidden, yet its presence governs everything below trade. Warning, prayer, curfew, fire, sickness, judgment. The people fear it because each ringing may change the day. It may call them to kneel, pay, run, gather, mourn, confess, or shut their doors before darkness. And as you step away from the market stones, carrying the smell of bread and smoked fish in your cloak, you understand that the bell is not only a sound above the town, it is the town's memory, its command, and its nervous heart. You leave the market square by the east lane, with the monk at your side and the brown dog weaving ahead as though he has urgent business with every puddle. Behind you, the town does not vanish at once. It follows in layers the warm smell of bread, the sour tang of fish, the echo of the proclamation bell, the scrape of carts, the mutter of bargains resumed under watchful stone. Then the house is thin, the lane dips, and the east gate opens before you with its patched timbers, iron hinges, and a guard who looks as if he has spent the morning losing an argument with the cold. Beyond the wall, the road is slick with churned mud and pale frost. The broken cartwheel mentioned by the innkeeper lies beside the ditch, half sunk and abandoned, its spokes jutting like ribs from the muck. Someone has tied a bit of red thread around one splinter, perhaps to mark it for repair, perhaps to ward off bad luck, perhaps because people in this world will tie thread to nearly anything and hope the saints admire the effort. The monk notices your glance and gives the smallest smile. "Better thread than nothing," he says. This is not entirely comforting, but it has the calm sound of a man who has copied many manuscripts and accepted the limits of human planning. You walk along the river road as the monastery bell begins again in the distance. It does not have the heavy authority of the town bell. It is higher, clearer, and somehow colder, a sound that seems to come from stone cloisters, clipped hedges, wet roofs, and hands folded inside sleeves. It calls the brothers to their hours, and though you're not a monk, your feet fall into its rhythm. The road bends past leafless willows and a frozen ditch where reeds tremble in the wind. Smoke lifts from a charcoal burner's hut in the trees. A crow watches from a post with the stern interest of a tiny black judge. The monastery appears slowly, first as a tower above bare orchard branches, then as a long wall of pale stone, then as a gatehouse with a carved cross over the arch. Its roofs are dark with rain, its yard neat despite the season, and its silence different from the town's silence. The town always seems to be holding back noise. The monastery seems to be listening. At the gate, a lay brother opens a small wicket and peers out. He knows your monk, or at least knows his habit, which is close enough for hospitality. You duck inside beneath the arch and feel the world change. Mud gives way to cobbles. The smell of tannery and fish fades into damp stone, beeswax, cabbage broth, and the faint sweetness of stored apples. A row of wooden shoes stands near the wall. Bundles of rushes lie ready for strewing in the guest hall. An old iron key, large enough to suggest it locks away either treasure or very determined cheese, hangs from the porter's belt. You're taken to the guest house, a low building warmed by a careful fire. Travellers sit there already, 2 pilgrims with scallop badges sewn to their cloaks, a woman carrying wool to market, and a thin man with a bandaged hand who claims a cart horse mistook his fingers for oats. No one can quite agree whether horses are foolish or merely honest about their priorities. A wooden bowl of pottage is set before you, thick with peas and herbs, and you eat it with the reverence owed to anything warm after a muddy road. Yet you have not come fully to rest. The monk who walked with you nods toward the cloister, and soon you follow him through a covered walk where the stones hold the chill-like memory. In the garth, winter herbs grow in raised beds: sage, hyssop, rue, betony, and rosemary clipped low against the cold. A novice sweeps the path, moving damp leaves into careful piles. From the scriptorium comes the scratch of quills and the small coughs of men trying not to admit they are freezing. Ink-stained scribes bend over parchment near narrow windows, each letter set down slowly, as if words themselves must be coaxed into salvation. Then the bell rope moves. It descends through a hole in the ceiling near the tower stair, thick, worn, and darkened by years of hands. A lay brother steps forward, wraps both palms around it, and waits. He is broader than the monks, with shoulders shaped by practical labour. His face is calm, but you notice that no one stands too close. The rope hangs still for a breath, then he pulls. The first stroke shakes the stones. You feel it in your chest before your ears fully understand it. The rope leaps upward, then drops, and the bell ringer bends with it, using his weight, timing, and a kind of bodily trust that seems both skilled and unwise. The second stroke follows, deep and round, rolling out through the tower and across fields toward the town you left behind. The dog, who has slipped in despite rules surely written somewhere, presses himself under a bench and looks personally betrayed. The bell ringer pulls again, and you see the danger in the work. The rope can burn the palms. A bad swing can drag a careless man upward or throw him against the wall. In some towers, people whisper, bells have cracked loose, beams have failed, and ringers have been struck or crushed. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how often this truly happens, because every village improves a disaster in the retelling, but everyone agrees a bell deserves respect. It is holy, useful, costly, and heavy enough to turn foolishness into a funeral. After the ringing, the lay brother opens his hands. The skin across his palms is thick and pale with old scars. He rubs them with a little grease kept in a clay pot, mixed with beeswax and perhaps calendula. Some swear that bell ringers should wear charms against deafness, lightning, and sudden death. Others insist that a good grip and sober habits are better. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the charm or the sobriety is rarer. The monk leads you closer to the base of the tower, where the rope hangs breathing gently after its labour. He tells you, in a low voice, that bells are blessed before they are raised. They may be washed with holy water, anointed, named, and sensed like living servants of the church. Some people call it the baptism of a bell, though learned men argue over the word. The bell may bear the name of a saint. It may carry inscriptions asking it to drive away storms, demons, plague, and fire. It may hold a little silver, or so the villagers say. No one can quite agree whether silver sweetens the sound or merely sweetens the story. You imagine the casting the pit dug, the mould shaped from clay and wax, the furnace roaring, molten bronze poured like captured sunset into darkness. A bell is born from heat, smoke, danger, and prayer. Perhaps that is why people half fear it even before it rings. It has passed through fire and returned with a voice. A novice arrives carrying a tray of beeswax candles for the chapel. He moves carefully, lips pressed tight, as if one dropped candle might ruin the spiritual balance of the entire afternoon. The monk takes one and shows you the soft golden wax, cleaner and sweeter than tallow. Beeswax belongs near altars. Tallow belongs in ordinary rooms, where it smokes, spits, and reminds everyone that cows continue serving society in unexpected ways. The candle is set near a small statue of Saint Agatha, whom some invoke against fire, though here the bell also shares that duty. When another brother passes, the monk lowers his voice further and tells you of old fears. Some villagers believe that when bells ring at the right hour, evil spirits cannot cross the parish bounds. Some say a bell can chase devils from the air. Some say the sound breaks enchantments laid under doorstones or churns bewitched milk back toward butter. This last claim seems extremely specific, but medieval life spends a great deal of thought on milk becoming butter, and perhaps rightly so. Hunger makes theology practical. You stand beneath the tower and look upward into the dim wooden frame above. The bell itself is hidden, but you can feel its mass. It hangs there like a sleeping beast, waiting for the next hour, the next death, the next storm, the next command. The fear around it is not simple superstition. It is fear of power, of height, of holy things made physical, of sound strong enough to enter every cottage and every dream. At last you return to the guest house, where pottage steam clouds the air and the pilgrims compare badges beside the fire. The half-burned candle from the town seems to have a cousin here, another small flame trembling against the dusk. Outside, the monastery bell settles into silence. Inside, people speak softly, as if bronze might be listening through the walls. You leave the monastery after the noon meal, when the sky is lowered into a grey woolen roof, and the fields beyond the gate seem to be holding their breath. The monk walks with you as far as the outer wall, his hands tucked into his sleeves, his ink-stained fingers hidden from the wind. The brown dog emerges from beneath the guest-house bench just in time to join you, carrying in his mouth something that may once have been a crust of bread and now has the dignity of treasure. Behind you, The monastery bell rings once, then settles into silence, and the sound follows you into the open country. The road bends away between winter fields. Frost still clings to the shaded places, though the mud has softened in the cart ruts. Bare hedges divide strips of land where peasants have turned the earth for future sowing, and the ridges lie dark and wet beneath the clouds. In the distance, a man in a patched cloak drives 2 oxen slowly along a furrow, his breath rising white each time he calls to them. A woman crosses a field with a basket on her hip, pausing now and then to gather fallen sticks for the hearth. Near a ditch, 3 children's voices carry faintly from somewhere behind a hedge, though you never see them. Only their small footprints in the soft bank and a row of willow switches stuck into the mud like tiny spears. The wind changes. It comes first as a colder touch along your neck, then as a hush moving through reeds and dead grass. The monk looks up. You do too. Over the western woods, clouds are thickening into a bruised blue-black mass, the kind that seems to have rolled across half the kingdom collecting bad intentions. A strip of pale light remains under it, low and sharp, making the distant bell tower of the monastery stand out like a bone. Some swear that storms have moods, some say they come when saints are displeased, when witches mutter over bowls of water, when unburied bones are troubled, or when a village has been too careless with oaths. No one can quite agree whether thunder is the voice of heaven, the anger of air, or simply weather doing what weather has always done with very little regard for human comfort. Yet, out here, on a bare road with fields wide around you, the old explanations feel closer than they did beside the monastery fire. The first rumble comes softly, not overhead, but far beyond the hills. The monk stops walking. You hear the bell again. At first you think it is memory. Then the sound rolls out clearly from behind you, one deep stroke from the monastery tower, then another, then a measured peal that spreads across the fields. The bell ringer is at the rope again. His scarred palms are taking hold. Bronze is swinging in the tower, sending its voice into the heavy air. You stand in the road while the sound travels past you toward the darkening sky. In many villages, people believe bells can drive storms away. Blessed bells, especially those named for powerful saints, are rung when thunderheads gather, when hail threatens crops, when lightning walks too near thatched roofs and timber barns. The sound is thought to frighten demons hiding in storm clouds, to break the force of wicked winds, to remind heaven that humble folk below have barley, beans, sheep, and roofs they would very much like to keep. A bell against a storm is prayer made loud enough for frightened fields to hear, yet fear sits inside that hope like a coal inside ash. Lightning loves height, or so people notice even if they do not speak of it in learned terms. Towers rise above roofs, bells hang high in wooden frames. The very act of ringing against a storm may place the ringer close to the danger he's trying to turn aside. Those who tell the tale never fully agree how many men have died at bell ropes during tempests, but every shire seems to know at least one story of a tower struck, a bell cracked, a ringer thrown down, a beam split, or a church roof set smoking while villagers stood below praying harder than they had planned. The wind lifts your cloak. Across the fields, peasants begin to move. The man with the oxen turns them toward the byre. The woman with sticks quickens her step. A shepherd on the low-rise waves his crook toward a boy driving sheep under a stand of thorn trees. Doors close in distant cottages. Smoke from hearth holes flattens and twists. The dog presses close to your leg, crust forgotten. Another bell answers from a smaller church beyond the fields, faint and uneven, as if the ringer there is less practiced or more afraid. The 2 bells overlap, monastery bronze deep and steady, village bell thin and urgent, Their voices cross above the land. For a while, the whole countryside seems strung between them. You pass a roadside shrine tucked beneath an elder tree, its little roof patched with moss, its wooden saint faded by rain. Someone has left offerings there, a twist of wool, 3 hazelnuts, a bent pin, and a stub of tallow candle burned down to a greasy lump. The monk pauses to bow his head. You do the same. The dog sniffs the hazelnuts, finds them spiritually unhelpful, and moves on. Beside the shrine hangs a charm against lightning, a small strip of cloth tied around a piece of rowan wood, with a scrap of prayer scratched on it by someone whose letters stagger like tired geese. Some swear rowan keeps away witchcraft and storm harm. Others keep a stone with a natural hole in it near the door, or hang blessed palm from Palm Sunday in the rafters, or place a horseshoe above the threshold, ends up or down depending on which neighbour is most persuasive. Even now, it is hard to tell whether these customs ease the weather or merely the heart, but the heart in storm country is no small thing. Rain begins in large cold drops. It strikes the road with dark marks, then ticks against your hood. The monk gestures toward a barn at the edge of the next field, and you hurry there, boots sliding in the mud. The barn belongs to a tenant farm, and its door stands open just enough for shelter. Inside, the air smells of hay, old wood, animals, and stored winter. A few hens mutter from a corner. Bundles of dried beans hang from a beam. A rake, a flail, and a wooden yoke lean against the wall. Near the back, a stack of turf waits to be burned when wood runs low. The farmer's wife appears from a small adjoining shed with the rushlight cupped in one hand. She's not surprised to find strangers sheltering, because weather makes neighbours of everyone, whether they deserve the promotion or not. The monk speaks a blessing. You offer a coin for the shelter, but she waves it away and points instead to a bench made from a split log. Her own cloak is pinned with a simple brooch of bone, polished from use. Around her wrist is a cord knotted 9 times. She says, almost casually, that her mother taught her to knot it during thunder to keep fear from climbing into the throat. No one argues. Thunder speaks again, closer now. The bells continue through the rain. Their sound is changed by weather. It comes blurred, softened, sometimes swallowed by wind, then returned in pieces. You sit among the hay and listen while the storm moves over the fields. The dog curls against your boot. The monk murmurs a psalm under his breath, though so softly that the words become more like breath than speech. The farmer's wife crosses herself each time lightning whitens the cracks between the barn boards. You begin to understand why bells could both comfort and terrify. When they ring in fair weather, they order the day. When they ring in storm, they speak into chaos. They tell people that someone is awake, someone is pulling the rope, someone is trying to push back against the dark sky. But the sound also reminds every listener that danger is near enough to require bronze, prayer, and courage. A storm bell is not peace. It is alarm dressed as hope. Then lightning flashes. For a heartbeat, the whole barn becomes bone-white rafters, hay, monk's hood, farmer's wife's hand, the dog's open eye. Thunder follows so sharply that the hens explode into offended noise. Outside, the bells falter, then resume. You imagine the lay brother under the tower, hands on the rope, shoulders bending, the bronze swinging above him while the storm circles the spire. You imagine every cottage listening. You imagine children hushed under wool blankets, old men counting the strokes, women checking covered embers, farmers thinking of fields, roofs, animals, and stored grain. Somewhere, perhaps only in your mind, the town bell from dusk answers too, deep and remembered. The storm passes slowly, as medieval storms prefer to do when they know people are waiting. Rain drums on the roof, water runs from the eaves in silver cords, the bells ring less often, then stop one by one, leaving only the hush of wet fields and the quiet drip of the barn. When you step back outside, the air smells clean and bruised. Mist rises from the road. The monastery tower is half hidden behind rain, but it still stands. The monk looks toward it for a long moment. Then he nods, as if to thank both heaven and timber for their cooperation. You continue along the lane toward evening, boots heavier with mud, cloak darker with rain, and the bell's storm voice still trembling somewhere inside your chest. By the time you reach the next hall, evening has gathered itself from the wet fields and settled low around the timber walls. The storm has moved east, leaving behind a sky the colour of old pewter, streaked with faint yellow where the sun has gone down behind the hills. Water drips from thatch. The lane shines with puddles. Your boots carry half the road with them, and the brown dog has become so decorated with mud that he appears to be wearing a second, less respectable coat. The hall belongs to a small manor farm set just beyond the village green. It is not a castle, though it clearly wishes to be taken seriously. A ditch runs along one side. A wooden gate leans under a crossbeam. A dovecote stands near the yard, round and pale in the fading light, with birds tucked into their holes like thoughts put away for the night. Behind the main house, cattle shift in a byre, their warm animal breath thickening the air. A servant girl carries a pail toward the door, stepping around puddles with the weary elegance of someone who has long ago stopped expecting mud to behave. Inside, the hall is smoky, warm, and crowded with ordinary life. Rushes cover the packed earth floor, fresh near the high table and rather less fresh near the door, where boots, dogs, and damp travellers have expressed themselves freely. Soot-dark rafters vanish into shadow above you. A fire burns in the central hearth, and the smoke escapes through a roof opening only when it feels like being cooperative. Benches line the walls. Iron hooks hold cloaks, ladles, and a few dried herbs tied in bundle sage, thyme, and a little mugwort, which some swear keeps bad dreams away if tucked near the bedding. Others say it only makes the bedding smell like a determined garden. The monk who walked with you has parted toward the church house nearby, but he has secured you a place for the night among the manor's guests and workers. A steward in a fur-lined collar gives you one measuring look, the sort that counts your cloak, your purse, your usefulness, and your likelihood of stealing spoons. Apparently you pass, or at least fail to alarm him. He points you toward a bench near the lower end of the hall, where a wooden trencher waits beside a bowl of pottage, coarse bread, and a strip of smoked fish. You sit. The dog sits beneath you. This arrangement now seems permanent. Around the hearth, people eat with the soft sounds of hunger being persuaded into patience. A ploughman holds his bowl close to his chest. An old woman breaks bread into ale to soften it. A boy turns oatcakes on a flat stone by the embers, watched by 3 men with the solemn attention usually given to royal judgments. At the upper end, the manor reeve speaks quietly with the steward over tallies scratched into a wax tablet. Near them hangs a bunch of iron keys, dark and heavy, each one belonging to a chest, storehouse, door, or obligation. You are beginning to relax when the bell rings. Not the quick alarm of storm, not the brisk summons of market. This is slow. One stroke falls from the village church, then a long waiting silence. Another stroke, then another. The hall changes. No one stands at once. No one cries out. The change is smaller and colder than that. Spoons pause, Heads lift. The fire cracks softly as though trying not to intrude. A woman near the hearth crosses herself and lowers her eyes. The steward stops speaking. The boy by the oatcakes forgets to turn one, and it blackens at the edge with tragic dedication. The death knell continues. You feel the sound come through the wet night, through timber and thatch, through the smoke and the smell of pottage. Each stroke seems to leave more silence behind it than it takes up. This bell is not telling people to gather in the square or cover their embers or hurry their sheep inside. It is telling them that a soul is loosening from the world, or has already gone. It is telling the parish to pray. It is also telling everyone to count their own breaths, though no one says this aloud. No one can quite agree whether the bell is rung before death to frighten away evil spirits waiting near the bed, or after death to guide the soul, or both, because medieval customs often prefer not to choose when several possibilities are available. Some swear that the sound confuses demons, making them lose the path to the dying. Some say it calls neighbours to pray so the soul is not alone. Others whisper that if the bell sounds strangely, cracked or muffled or out of time, it may mean the dead person is reluctant to leave, which is not the sort of thought that improves a dark hallway. A serving woman leans close to another and murmurs a name. You catch only part of it, old Martin. Perhaps, or Martha, someone from the cottages beyond the mill. The woman beside her shakes her head and says the fever took hold after the rain. Another says a charm was tried, a strip of linen tied with 3 knots, a prayer spoken over warm ale, a little crushed betony under the tongue. Someone else mentions a barber surgeon with leeches, but too late, even now. It is hard to tell whether the remedies failed, the illness was too strong, or the tale has already begun to arrange itself into something people can bear. The bell goes on. The brown dog presses his chin onto your boot. Not asleep now. His ears tilt toward the sound. You remember the small chapel bell in the market, ringing for the priest carrying the holy vessel to a sick bed. You remember people kneeling in the mud, the way holiness and sickness move together through the lane. Now the same thread has reached this hall. The church tower gathers the village into one act of listening. The steward finally speaks, but softly. He orders a servant to cover the embers carefully tonight, for the wind is still unsettled after the storm. Another servant is told to set aside bread for the household of the dead. It is a small kindness, practical and plain. Death takes labour from a cottage as well as a life. Someone must sit the watch, wash the body, fetch the priest, find candles, prepare a board or beer, and keep the animals fed. Grief, in this world, still has chores. At the hearth, the old woman reaches into a pouch and draws out a small pilgrim badge shaped like a scallop shell. She rubs it between finger and thumb as the bell sounds. Perhaps she bought it on a road to a shrine. Perhaps a son brought it home. Perhaps it has never been farther than this manor but has travelled often in stories. Those who tell the tale never fully agree about objects kept close to the heart. They may be souvenirs, charms, promises, or simply something to hold when hands need holding. The death knell slows, or perhaps your listening stretches time. You wonder how many people in the village are counting the strokes. In some places, bells tell whether the dead is a man, woman, or child by number and pattern, though customs differ from parish to parish, and everyone is certain their own way is correct. A bell can announce identity without a name. It can make the whole parish understand loss before a messenger reaches the door. Another stroke, then silence. The hall remains still for a breath after the ringing ends. That is the heaviest moment, when the bell has stopped but its meaning has not. Then life returns carefully, The boy turns the burnt oatcake and decides, with admirable courage, that only one side has suffered. Spoons move again. Someone adds a log to the fire. A woman begins humming under her breath, not quite a song, more a way of keeping the silence from becoming too large. You eat slowly. The pottage is thick, smoky, and full of barley. The bread is coarse enough to remind your teeth they have duties. The smoked fish tastes of salt and cold rivers. Ordinary food feels different after the death knell, not less ordinary, but more precious because it is warm and present and held in your hands. Later, when wool blankets are brought out and the hall settles for sleep, you lie near the wall with your cloak folded beneath your head. The half-burned candle on a shelf has gone out, but another tallow light trembles near the hearth. Smoke curls under the rafters. Rainwater ticks from the eaves outside. Somewhere in the dark, the household whispers the name of the one who has died, and the name passes from mouth to mouth until it becomes part of the night. You listen for the bell again, fearing it and wanting it both. If it rings, it means sorrow has a sound and no one is left entirely alone with it. If it stays silent, the quiet itself seems to listen. At last the fire settles lower. The dog sighs in his sleep. The hall breathes around you, and above the wet village, the church tower stands unseen, holding its bronze voice until the next need rises from the dark. Morning comes pale and slow, as if the sky has not fully decided whether the world deserves another day. You wake in the manor hall to the soft cough of embers, the rustle of people rising from straw, and the deep ache of having slept on a floor that believes comfort is a rumour told by distant nobles. Your wool blanket has twisted around one leg. Your cloak is under your shoulder. The brown dog is pressed against your side with the serene confidence of a creature who has contributed nothing to the household and expects breakfast anyway. The hall smells of smoke, damp rushes, warm bodies, old wood, and the last of the last night's pottage. A servant stirs the hearth, coaxing flame from ash. Another carries a pail outside, shoulders hunched against the cold. Near the upper end, the steward is already awake, speaking with the reeve in low tones beside the wax tablet, because manor business does not rest merely because souls have passed. Storms have rolled, or travellers have developed opinions about sleeping arrangements. The death knell from the night before seems to linger in the beams. No bell rings now, but people move more quietly than they did at supper. A loaf is wrapped in cloth for the cottage of the dead. A rushlight is pinched out. A woman ties her veil more carefully and says she's going to the church before work begins. The monk, who has returned before dawn from the priest's house, finds you near the door and nods toward the same path. You step outside into a yard washed clean by rain. Mud waits faithfully under every footstep. Beyond the gate, the village lies low and grey, its cottages tucked beneath roofs of thatch and wooden shingles. Smoke rises from hearth holes. A cock crows somewhere, proud of information the bell has been managing for centuries. Frost silvers the edges of the green, and the church stands beyond it, small but solid, with its square tower holding the morning like a closed fist. You follow the monk and several villagers toward the church porch. A woman carries a twist of wool as an offering. A ploughman brings a little beeswax candle wrapped in linen, saved perhaps from a feast day, or bought at some cost from a peddler. 2 pilgrims from the manor hall walk ahead, their scallop badges clicking softly against their staffs. The dog trots with you until the churchyard gate, then pauses, uncertain whether holy ground welcomes dogs. After a moment he decides theology is flexible and enters. Inside, the church is cold enough to make your breath visible. Stone flags lie uneven beneath the scattering of rushes. Painted saints gaze down from the walls in faded reds, blues, and golds, their eyes wide and solemn, their hands lifted in blessing or warning. No one can quite agree whether the painted St. Michael near the chancel looks stern because he is weighing souls, or because the artist dislikes someone in the parish. Either way, you find yourself standing a little straighter beneath his gaze. Near the altar, beeswax candles burn with a clean, honeyed smell, different from the smoky tallow of halls and cottages. A small chest sits under an embroidered cloth, bound with iron straps and locked with a key the priest wears on a cord beneath his vestment. This is where the parish keeps its treasured relic, a fragment said to be bone from a saint's hand, brought long ago by a knight returning from pilgrimage, or a merchant with a convincing tongue, or a bishop's servant who owed the village a favour. Those who tell the tale never fully agree, which may be why the relic is both trusted and doubted with equal devotion. The priest lifts the cloth, unlocks the chest, and reveals a smaller casket of dark wood and tarnished silver. The villagers lean forward. Some cross themselves. One old man bows his head so low his cap nearly slips into the rushes. The pilgrim woman beside you whispers that relics can heal fever, protect fields, ease childbirth, strengthen oaths, and keep storms from breaking roofs. The monk's expression suggests that some claim should perhaps be filed gently under hope rather than doctrine. But he says nothing. Hope has its own kind of hunger, and churches are full of hungry hearts. You stand close enough to see the casket's worn corners. Beside it lie wax offerings shaped like hands, feet, eyes, and little sleeping figures, left by people asking healing for aching joints, dim sight, sick children, and restless dreams. There are crutches leaning near one wall, though no one can quite agree whether they were abandoned after miracles or after their owners died and no one knew what else to do with them. A strip of linen hangs from a peg, marked with a dark stain, and said to have touched the relic during a plague year. Some swear it saved a household. Others say the household had already boiled their water, burned sour bedding, and kept strangers away, which is less dramatic but also useful. Then the small handbell rings near the altar. Its silver note trembles through the chancel. Everyone lowers their heads. The sound is delicate compared with the tower bell, yet in the close stone space it feels sharp and intimate, like a thread pulled through cloth. It tells the people to attend, to pray, to look inward, to remember that sacred power is near and still. Fear comes with it. The handbell marks holiness. Yes, but holiness is not always comfortable. It is a bright thing brought into a cold room. It asks people to bring their sick bodies, their guilty memories, their dead, their bargains, their debts, and their hopes into the same light. You kneel with the others. The stone presses through your clothing. A woman near you touches a charm hidden beneath her sleeve, perhaps a written prayer folded into a tiny pouch. A man whispers the name of a sick cow, then looks embarrassed. Though in a village, a cow may be the difference between winter survived and winter endured poorly. Some swear that bells blessed by relics ring sweeter and carry farther. Some say a bell once rung above a saint's bone can frighten pestilence from the parish bounds. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such beliefs belong to official blessing, old folk memory, or the simple fact that when danger comes, people reach for every rope they can find. After the prayer, the priest allows the villagers to pass near the casket. They do not touch the relic itself. They touch the cloth, kiss their fingers, bow their heads, or hold out candles to be blessed. The ploughman offers his beeswax candle and asks that it be kept for the next storm. The priest nods, accepting it with grave care. The candle will join others in a cupboard near the sacristy, ready to burn when thunder threatens, when sickness comes, when death needs watching, or when darkness presses too hard against the walls. You move past the chancel and notice a rope descending near the tower door, still and thick in the cold. The great bell above is silent, but you feel its presence differently now. It is not only town command or storm warning or death knell. It is tied to the altar, to relics, to wax, to prayer, to the old longing for protection. Its sound carries all this outward into muddy lanes and frost fields. When people fear the bell, they fear not just danger, but the holy answer to danger, which can feel nearly as powerful. Outside, the morning has brightened. Villagers drift back toward chores, carrying blessed candles, folded cloths, crumbs of comfort, and worries not fully eased. The dog emerges from the porch with a stolen crust, proving that even in the shadow of relics, temptation remains industrious. The monk catches your eye, almost smiling. You turn toward the road again, and behind you the church bell gives a single soft stroke for the hour. It follows you over the green, past the wet hedges, and into the day. No longer only frightening, no longer only kind, but something older and stranger, a bronze voice carrying faith, fear, and the stubborn hope of people who live close to the dark. By late afternoon, the road has turned back toward the town, and the light has thinned into that blue-grey hour when every hedge seems farther away than it was at noon. You walk with your cloak drawn close, following the monk's direction along a lane bordered by bare fields, low stone walls, and patches of thorn where old leaves cling like tired scraps of leather. The brown dog trots ahead, then behind, then ahead again, deeply committed to making the journey twice as long as necessary. The village church falls behind you. Its bell has marked the hour once more, a mild and ordinary sound, but you have begun to hear ordinary sounds differently. Each stroke carries layers now. Market tolls, storm warnings, death knells, relic prayers. The little handbell at the altar, the great bronze throat hidden in darkness above the beams. A bell is not one thing. It changes its face depending on the hour, and that is perhaps why people never fully trust it. The road rises toward the town wall as sunset drains behind the western trees. The broken cartwheel still lies in the ditch near the east approach, though someone has moved it closer to the hedge and propped it upright. The red thread tied around the spoke flutters in the cold breeze. No one can quite agree whether marking broken things keeps worse luck from gathering around them, but many people do it anyway. It is difficult to live in a world of mud, fever, taxes, and falling roofs without at least trying to negotiate with misfortune. You reach the east gate just as the sky darkens behind the battlements. The guards are more alert than they were in the morning. One holds a lantern behind a horn pane, its light soft and brown. Another checks the names of latecomers with a clerk whose ink is thickening in the cold. A small brazier glows beside the guard bench, and the smoke smells of charcoal and damp gloves. Beyond the archway, inside the town, you see lanes already filling with shadow. Then the curfew bell rings. It begins with a deep, measured peal from the parish tower. The sound rolls over the gate and into the fields behind you, as though the town is calling its own people back into its stone ribs. The guards straighten. A woman hurrying with a basket of leeks breaks into a half-run. Two apprentices carrying a plank between them quicken their pace, and one nearly steps into a puddle deep enough to begin a separate parish. The dog slips through the gate first, shamelessly avoiding all formal entry procedures. You pass beneath the arch as the bell continues. Inside, the effect is immediate. Shutters close, stalls are dragged inward. A baker's boy covers the last loaves. A potter wraps his unsold cups in straw. A woman lifts a rushlight from a windowsill and disappears into her house. The curfew does not mean every soul must sleep at once. Medieval life is rarely so tidy. It means fires must be covered, gates must be shut, movement must be explained, and darkness must be taken seriously. Some swear that the curfew bell was first meant to save towns from fire by ordering every household to rake ashes over their hearths and cover embers beneath iron or clay. Others insist it is as much about keeping order as keeping houses standing. Even now, it is hard to tell whether the bell protects people from flames, strangers, thieves, or their own talent for making poor decisions after ale. Perhaps all of these, a good rule, like a good cloak, often covers more than one weakness. You follow the main lane toward the churchyard wall, but the street feels different from the morning market. The smells remain bread, smoke, damp wool, animals, drains best treated as theological challenges, but the colours have faded. Torchlight flickers under overhangs. A lantern swings outside an alehouse, creaking on its iron hook. The upper stories of houses lean over you, and the strip of sky above is now a narrow band of deepening blue. Somewhere nearby, a pig complains behind a fence with the emotion of a betrayed lord. The bell rings again. A watchman appears at the corner, wrapped in a heavy cloak and carrying a staff and lantern. A small badge on his cap marks him as one of the night watch, though the badge hangs crookedly, suggesting that public safety has had a long day. He calls for fires to be covered and strangers to keep to their lodgings. His voice follows the bell's command, smaller but sharper, human law trailing after bronze authority. You pass a doorway where an old woman is setting a clay fire cover over her hearth embers. The cover is blackened from years of use, pierced with little holes that let the coals breathe without leaping into flame. Beside her, a girl sprinkles a handful of salt near the threshold. The old woman notices your glance and says salt discourages ill luck from slipping in after dark. The girl adds that it also discourages slugs, which may be the more measurable miracle. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether household charms work because of saints, old custom, or because they make people feel less helpless when shadows lengthen. At the next corner, the monk pauses to speak with a priest servant carrying 2 candles and a small bundle of keys. The servant says a gate near the west wall will be barred early, just as the morning proclamation warned. Trouble on the road has not been explained. That makes it larger in everyone's mind. Bandits, soldiers, wolves, runaway villains, angry creditors, and one extremely lost nobleman have all been proposed in the alehouse, each theory shaped by the fears of the person telling it. Medieval rumour travels faster than a horse and requires less feeding. You continue through a lane where water drips steadily from eaves. The church tower stands ahead, dark against the sky, its bell still sending slow waves through the town. You cannot see the bronze, but you feel how thoroughly it owns the evening. Without the bell, every household might decide the hour differently. With it, doors close together, fires lower together, suspicion rises together. That is the uneasy comfort of curfew. It draws people indoors, where hearth smoke stings the eyes and wool blankets wait in corners, where bowls are washed, tools set aside, children hushed, dogs fed scraps, and iron keys turned in oak doors. But it also makes the streets feel forbidden. Every footstep after the bell becomes a question. Every shadow becomes a possible answer. Near the churchyard, You see the merchant with the dried figs arguing quietly with an innkeeper about the price of lodging. His cart cannot leave until morning, and the west gate is barred. He complains that the town charges him to enter, charges him to sell, charges him to sleep, and will likely charge him to dream if anyone finds a proper measure for it. The innkeeper replies that dreams require fresh rushes and therefore cost extra. It is the kind of humour that grows best in cold places. The curfew bell stops. For a few breaths, the town listens to its own silence. Then the last gates groan shut. The sound of iron bolts sliding into place carries down the lane. A horse stamps in a stable. A baby cries behind a shutter, then quiets. Somewhere, someone laughs once, softly, and is hushed. Above, the first stars appear between chimney smoke and tower stone. You enter the same guest house where your journey inside the town began, though it feels changed now. The horn window glows with candlelight. Rushes have been stirred on the floor. The innkeeper's wife hangs a fresh bundle of rosemary and rue near the door, muttering that too many strangers have passed through and the air needs discipline. The monk accepts a cup of small ale. You take a place near the hearth, stretching your chilled fingers toward the warmth while the dog collapses under the bench as if he has personally enforced curfew across the entire county. Outside, the town is locked within its walls. Inside, the fire settles under its cover, not out, only guarded. You understand then that the curfew bell frightens people, because it marks the border between the known day and the uncertain night. It says the world beyond the door has changed. It says the road is no longer yours. It says the town is safe only if everyone obeys the sound. And under the rafters, with smoke drifting upward and the memory of bronze still soft in your ears, you sit quietly, listening to the dark gather against the shutters. You sit through the first part of the evening in the guest house, watching the fire shrink under its clay cover while the curfew settles over the town like a second roof. The innkeeper's wife moves from table to hearth, checking bowls, stacking trenchers, and scolding the smoke whenever it leans too eagerly into the room. The brown dog sleeps beneath the bench with one paw over his nose, as if the day has offended him beyond words. Outside, the streets have gone narrow and secret. Every sound seems larger now that the market has emptied and the gates have shut. A horse shifts in a stable. A shutter bangs once in the wind. Somewhere far off, a watchman calls the hour, his voice thin beneath the dark. The church bell is silent, but after so many ringings, silence itself seems shaped like bronze. The guest house smells of ale, wet wool, onions, tallow smoke, and the rosemary bundle near the door. A merchant snores with his head near a sack of figs. Two pilgrims whisper over a scrap of parchment showing a route of shrines. Though the map is so vague, it might also guide a person confidently into a pond. The monk sits near the hearth, turning a small wooden cup between his hands. He's been quiet since curfew, listening perhaps to the house, perhaps to the town, perhaps to thoughts that move more slowly than speech. Then someone strikes the door. Not a polite tap, not a neighbour's casual knock, a hard, sudden blow against the oak. Everyone looks up. The innkeeper freezes with a trencher in her hand. The merchant jerks awake and clutches his sack as if figs are the first treasure bandits seek. The dog lifts his head, gives one uncertain bark, then remembers he's not paid for this and stays under the bench. A second blow comes. Then a voice outside calls for water, buckets, and able hands. A moment later the fire bell begins. It is nothing like the death knell, nothing like curfew. This bell strikes fast and wild, each peal tumbling after the next, urgent enough to shake sleep from bones and sense from heads. The sound leaps through the town, from tower to thatch, from lane to lane, from shuttered room to shuttered room. It does not invite, it commands movement. The innkeeper drops the trencher. "Up," she says, and suddenly the whole room is on its feet. You stumble into the yard with the others, cloak half fastened, boots badly tied, heart thudding in time with the bell. The cold hits your face. Smoke is already moving above the rooftops, not the soft blue hearth smoke of evening, but a darker, thicker smear being torn by the wind. Down the lane, people spill from doorways carrying buckets, hooks, blankets, and poles. Some have lanterns. Some have only rushlights cupped in shaking hands. A man runs past with his hose unevenly tied. Which would be funny if the bell were not shouting above him like judgment. No one can quite agree whether fire is more feared in towns because of thatch, timber, tallow, rushes, ovens, carelessness, or because people insist on putting all these things close together and then calling it civilization. In truth, every house seems built from yesterday's fuel. Wooden beams lean over streets. Roofs touch almost roof to roof. Rushes dry near hearths. Candles tip. Sparks climb. One careless ember can turn a lane into a furnace before a prayer is finished. You follow the stream of people toward the smoke. The monk moves beside you, faster than you expect. Robe gathered above the mud. The dog runs ahead, then wisely returns, perhaps deciding that heroic dogs in burning towns receive more praise than sausages. Above you, the fire bell keeps ringing, frantic and uneven now, the ringer pulling with all his weight. You imagine rope burning through palms, shoulders straining, bronze swinging in the black tower. Each stroke telling the town that delay is danger. The fire is in a baker's lane near the west side of the churchyard. At first you see only smoke and torchlight, then sparks twisting upward like angry golden insects. A shed beside an oven has caught, and flames climb its wall with quick, hungry fingers. Men form a line from the well, passing leather buckets hand to hand. Women drag baskets, stools, and bedding from the nearest house. A boy carries a wooden chest so large he can barely see over it. An old woman stands in the street holding a painted saint from her wall and looking personally betrayed by architecture. The bell does not stop. Some swear that the sound of the fire bell frightens flames by calling saints and neighbours together. Others say it frightens people more than the flames do, and perhaps that is useful too. Even now, it is hard to tell whether courage begins in bravery, fear, habit, or simply having someone shove a bucket into your hands before you can object. You are pulled into the line. A bucket arrives, sloshing icy water down your sleeve. You pass it on. Another comes, then another. Your fingers numb quickly. Mud sucks at your boots. Smoke stings your eyes. A man with a long hook tears at burning thatch, dragging it down before sparks can leap to the next roof. The burning heap hisses as water hits it. Someone shouts to cover the oven embers. Someone else calls for more sand. The monk kneels briefly beside a coughing woman, guiding her away from the smoke, then returns to the line without ceremony. Above the lane, a small charm hangs from a doorway blessed palm. Dried and tied with red thread, it curls in the heat. The woman who owns the house sees it and cries out, not because the charm is valuable, but because it is one more promise being tested. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether charms fail in such moments, or whether they succeed by bringing enough frightened neighbours to the door. Watching the bucket line move under the bell's command, you suspect the difference is less clear than learned men might prefer. At last the flames shrink. They do not vanish grandly. They sulk down into smoke, ash, and steaming black wood. Men keep pulling apart thatch. Women stamp sparks beneath wet cloths. The baker, grey-faced and shaking, thanks everyone, then looks at the ruined shed with the expression of a man calculating loss by loaf, board, and winter morning. Only then does the fire bell slow. One last peal rolls over the town, ragged and tired. Then silence falls in pieces. People stand in the lane, breathing hard, faces streaked with soot, eyes shining from smoke and fear. The bell has frightened every household awake, but because it did, the town still stands. You walk back through the dark with wet sleeves, sore hands, and the smell of smoke deep in your cloak. The guest house fire is low and safely covered. The dog curls near it without shame. Above the roofs, the church tower is black against the stars, holding its bell in silence again, as if the bronze has spent its fury and now sleeps. Morning finds the town smelling of wet ash. You wake late by medieval standards, which means the sun has barely climbed and several people have already done enough labour to make you feel spiritually underprepared. The guest house is dim and smoky, with pale light pressing through the horn window. Your hands ache from the bucket line. Your sleeves still hold the sour scent of burned thatch, even after the innkeeper's wife insisted on shaking your cloak near the door and muttering that smoke clings worse than gossip. The brown dog, who did not pass a single bucket, stretches beside the hearth as if recovering from public service. Outside, the town has resumed itself, but carefully. People move through the lanes with the watchful manner of those who have spent the night measuring how close disaster came. Near the baker's lane, charred beams lie in a wet heap. Steam rises faintly from blackened straw. A man prods the ashes with a long pole while the baker's wife counts salvaged boards, broken pots, and one iron hinge as though each item is a small survivor. Above the lane, the church tower is pale in the morning mist. Its bell silent after last night's alarm, yet somehow more respected for having shouted everyone from sleep. The monk finds you near the well, where you're washing soot from your fingers in water cold enough to make regret feel warm. He tells you there will be manor court today in the village hall outside the town wall. The Lord Steward will sit, tenants will answer, fines will be named, and the bell will call them as surely as it called buckets in the night. You follow, partly because your road bends that way, partly because in this world every bell seems to open another door, and partly because the dog has already chosen the direction. By mid-morning you leave through the gate and take the muddy lane toward the manor green. The broken cartwheel is gone at last, though a dark round mark remains in the ditch where it lay. Someone has taken the red thread too. No one can quite agree whether such thread should be burned, buried, or tied to another problem until it gives up. The monk says nothing, but his mouth twitches as if he has heard every version and trusts none of them entirely. The manor hall sits beyond the green, squatting under a steep roof, its yard busy with carts, hens, and tenants standing in small worried knots. A bell hangs from a wooden frame near the entrance, smaller than the church bell but not gentle. It is iron-bound and plain, a working bell, a summoning bell. When the steward's man strikes it with a short hammer, the sound is hard, flat, and official. It does not roll like holy bronze. It cracks across the yard like a command. People gather. A tenant farmer wipes mud from his cap. A widow clutches a folded cloth containing coins. Two brothers stand apart from one another, each pretending the other is a weather condition. A miller leans on his staff with the careful innocence of a man whose flour measures may have inspired discussion. The steward appears in a fur-lined cloak, holding a roll of parchment, with iron keys at his belt and a face that has never wasted a smile on legal uncertainty. Inside, the hall is swept with fresh rushes near the table where the steward sits. The scent of crushed herbs rises faintly beneath the smell of damp wool and anxious bodies. A clerk opens his wax tablets and sharpens his stylus. On the wall hangs a pair of scales, a measuring rod, and a leather strap used for binding documents. Though it looks sufficiently grim to discourage several kinds of behaviour, you take a place near the lower wall, where you can watch without becoming part of the record. Which seems wise. The bell outside rings again, and each matter begins. First comes a dispute over a strip of field where one man's plough has wandered beyond its proper ridge. The accused man claims the oxen leaned. His neighbour claims the oxen were guided by sinful ambition. The steward listens with the patience of someone paid to turn quarrels into fines. A small payment is ordered, and both men bow, neither satisfied, which suggests the judgment has achieved balance. Then comes the miller. Some swear millers are born with flour in their sleeves and secrets in their thumbs. Others say they're merely blamed because everyone needs grain ground, and no one enjoys paying for it. The court hears that the miller's toll has been too generous to the miller. He objects, calls witnesses, invokes custom, and produces a measure that looks honest from across the room and suspicious from nearby. The steward orders it checked against the manor standard. The bell outside does not ring during this. But you feel its earlier strike hanging over the room. It called everyone here. It made absence noticeable. It turned private resentment into public judgment. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear the manor bell more than the church bell. The church bell speaks of heaven, storm, death, and fire. The manor bell speaks of rent, labour, fines, grazing rights, and days owed to the Lord's fields. Heaven may judge the soul eventually, but the steward can judge a missing hen before dinner. A woman is called next for brewing ale too weak, though several men in the hall appear personally willing to continue the investigation. She says the malt was poor, the water worse, and the customers ungrateful. The ale taster, a round man with a red nose and solemn office, confirms the ale lacked strength. No one can quite agree whether ale tasters suffer for the public good or serve themselves with unusual devotion. A fine is set, small but sharp enough to hurt. The woman bows stiffly and returns to her place, muttering that next time she'll brew it strong enough to make the ale taster see St. Peter in the foam. Then the clerk reads names of tenants owing boon work days to reap the Lord's field, mend fences, haul timber, or clear ditches. Each name falls like a smaller bell. Men nod, women count in silence. Labour is time, and time here is not private. It belongs partly to hunger, partly to weather, partly to saints, partly to lords, and often to whoever can ring loudest. Near the doorway, an old man rubs a charm of bone and thread between his fingers while waiting his turn. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such charms help in court. Some say a written prayer carried near the heart softens authority. Others say the steward is immune to parchment unless it bears a seal. The old man is fined for letting pigs stray into the Lord's wood. His charm does not prevent this, though perhaps it keeps him from saying what he thinks. By noon, the court thins. Coins have changed hands, obligations have been remembered, grievances have been trimmed into rulings. The steward rises, and the small bell is struck once more to end the sitting. Its final note is short and dry, but everyone hears release in it. You step outside into weak sunlight. The dog sniffs at the manor steps, finds no justice there, and looks toward the road. Across the fields, the parish church bell answers the hour, softer and deeper, floating over the green. For a moment, the two kinds of sound seem to meet in the air, manna command and church calling, earthly order and holy warning. You understand then that bells frighten people not only because they announce disaster, but because they summon obedience. They make people gather when they would rather stay hidden. They remind every listener that the world is woven from duties to God, to Lord, to neighbour, to fire, to field, to the dead, to the living, and beneath the winter sky, with mud drying on your boots and judgment still murmuring behind you. You walk on while the bell fades over the manor roofs. You leave the manor green after the court, carrying with you the dry clang of the steward's bell and the softer answer of the parish tower. The day has opened a little. Sunlight lies thinly over the fields, pale as watered ale, bright enough to show every rut in the road and not warm enough to forgive any of them. The monk has turned back toward the village priest, but before he leaves he points you toward the pilgrim road beyond the mill, where shrines and abbeys sit at intervals like beads on a worn cord. You will hear more bells that way, he says. He says it not as warning, exactly, and not as comfort either. By now you know the sound can be both. You thank him, and he gives a small bow, his ink-stained fingers tucked into his sleeves, then disappears down a lane where smoke lifts from cottage roofs. The brown dog remains with you, of course. Whatever vows guide monks, none appear strong enough to guide this dog away from possible meals. You take the road beyond the mill, its wheel turns slowly in the stream, knocking water from its paddles with a steady wooden sigh. The miller stands in the doorway, dusted pale from cap to boots, looking like a ghost who has chosen grain as a profession. He sees you looking and raises a hand, perhaps in greeting, perhaps to prove both sleeves are innocent. Behind him, sacks of meal lean against the wall, and the smell of flour, damp boards, and riverweed mixes with the cold air. Past the mill, the road becomes quieter, hedgerows close in, then fall away to show long strips of winter field, bare orchards, and small cottages with smoke threading from their roofs. A wayside cross stands at a fork, its stone face worn smooth by rain and hands. Around its base lie little offerings, a bent pin, a feather, a scrap of blue cloth, and 3 pebbles arranged in a line. No one can quite agree whether pilgrims leave such things from devotion, habit, worry, or the simple desire to make the road remember them. Roads in this age are hungry for memory. They swallow footprints, hoofprints, prayers, rumours, and names. You turn toward the Abbey Hills, where the land rises in slow folds. The dog ranges ahead, nose low, pausing to inspect every bush as if reading news written by other dogs with urgent quills. Above the fields, a bell sounds from far behind you, likely the parish marking the hour. A moment later, another answers from somewhere ahead. Then a third, faint and wavering, comes from the south where you can see no tower at all. The bells blur across the countryside. They do not strike together, not exactly. One begins as another fades. One is deep, another thin, another cracked at the edge. Wind carries them unevenly, folding them into the rustle of dry reeds, the creak of tree limbs, the caw of crows, the slop of your boots in mud. You walk inside a net of sound. Some bells belong to churches, some to chapels, some to monasteries hidden behind walls. Some may be only memory or imagination, because distance can make bronze into dream. Those who tell the tale never fully agree which bells are heard on the old pilgrim road after dusk. Some say one belongs to a ruined chapel where no priest has served in 100 years. Some say another rings beneath the earth, from a church swallowed by marsh after its villagers ignored a saint's warning. Others say tired travellers hear what they expect to hear, especially if they have eaten little but coarse bread and onions and have spent several days being bullied by weather. Even so, when a bell sounds from beyond a hill and no tower shows above the trees, you do not laugh, you only pull your cloak tighter. At midday, you meet other travellers near a roadside shrine tucked beside a spring. 2 women sit on a fallen log sharing bread and hard cheese. A man with a staff and a patched hood drinks from the spring using a wooden cup tied to his belt. 3 pilgrims have badges pinned to their hats' shells, keys, and a little stamped image of a saint whose face has been rubbed almost away. Their cloaks are spattered with mud up to the knee, which is the true badge of pilgrimage even if no shrine sells it. You rest with them. 1 woman gives you a piece of coarse bread. You share a sliver of smoked fish saved from the manor hall. The dog receives nothing officially and somehow eats anyway. The spring runs clear beneath a crust of ice at the edges, and someone has set a little iron cup there for travellers. Beside the water hangs a strip of linen covered with tiny knots. Some swear that if you tie a knot while naming a pain, then leave the thread at a holy spring. The pain will loosen as the cloth weathers. Others say the pain remains, but the telling of it grows lighter. Even now, it is hard to tell which is the greater mercy. The pilgrims speak of bells, because travellers speak of what follows them. One claims he once heard a bell ring by itself as he passed a chapel at midnight, and the next morning learned that a hermit had died there. Another says the bells of a coastal abbey once rang under the sea during a storm, warning fishermen away from rocks. The woman with hard cheese says her grandmother swore that a bell rung backward could curse a thief, though no one present can explain how one persuades a bell to ring backward without offending both physics and the parish priest. You listen while the wind moves through the bare trees. The tales do not hurry, they circle, wander, contradict themselves, and settle comfortably beside the spring. In this world, stories travel like bells, losing their clear shape with distance, gaining echoes instead. After resting, you walk on with the pilgrims for a while. The road climbs through a wood where last autumn's leaves lie dark and slick underfoot. Moss grows thick on the north sides of trunks. A small wooden cross has been nailed to an oak, and beneath it someone has tucked a sprig of rosemary, now dried and grey. The bell ahead rings again, nearer this time, and the pilgrims fall quiet. The sound moves through branches, softened by bark and mist, until it seems not above you, but around you. You understand why lonely travellers fear bells on such roads. A bell means settlement, safety, chapel, bread, and perhaps a place by a fire. But it also means the dead buried near the church wall, the sick waiting for a priest, the storm that may come, the curfew you might miss, the toll you may owe, the court that may summon you, the holy power you may not fully trust. A bell heard across fields at dusk can feel like a hand extended from the dark. A hand can guide, or warn, or pull. Toward evening, the trees thin and you see an abbey tower on a low hill, its stones warmed by the last light. The bell there rings for vespers, slow and golden, calling monks to prayer and travellers to the guest gate. Smoke rises behind the wall. A cart stands outside with one wheel newly mended, its spoke wrapped in red thread. You smile at the sight, not because you understand the charm, but because the road has begun to repeat itself in little signs. The dog trots through the abbey gate ahead of you with the confidence of one who has never paid a market toll, faced a manor court, or feared judgment from anything but an empty bowl. You follow more slowly, listening as the Vespers bell fades into the hill, the orchard, the wet road, and the deepening blue of evening. Behind you, the pilgrim road stretches back through all its echoes, and ahead, another night of stone walls, shared bread, whispered tales, and bronze voices waits. You sleep that night inside the Abbey guest house, under a roof that does not leak, and a wool blanket that only smells faintly of damp strangers, which by now feels almost luxurious. The Vespers bell has faded into memory. The monks have gone to their prayers, their meals, their silence, and their narrow beds. In the guest room, pilgrims murmur themselves towards sleep, one by one, while the fire settles into a red heart beneath ash. The brown dog curls near your knees as if this arrangement has been blessed by every abbot in Christendom. Outside, rain taps softly on the shutters. Somewhere beyond the wall, an owl calls from the orchard, and a horse shifts in its stall. You drift in and out of dreams where bells hang in mist, where ropes move by themselves, where every road leads through a gate, and every gate opens onto another sound. At dawn you wake not because a bell rings, but because it does not. The quiet is the first thing you notice. It is not ordinary quiet. It is not the gentle pause after prayer or the stillness before a household stirs. It has edges. It presses against the guest house walls, lies across the rushes, and gathers under the roof beams. A pilgrim near the hearth sits up, frowning. Another rubs her eyes and looks toward the shutter as if the missing sound might be hiding just outside. The abbey should have rung before first light. The hour should have been struck. The brothers called. The fields reminded that another day has been permitted to begin. Instead, there is only rainwater dripping from the eaves and the small scratch of a mouse somewhere inside the wall, conducting its own secret business with great confidence. No one can quite agree whether silence is peaceful or frightening until something expected fails to sound. A bell that rings too loudly may startle the heart, but a bell that does not ring at all lets the heart invent its own reasons. The pilgrims rise quickly. The dog lifts his head. Even he seems troubled, perhaps because humans are troubled, perhaps because breakfast has been delayed by theology. A lay brother enters the guest house with a lantern. His face is pale in the little light, and his hood is wet at the edges. He speaks quietly to the gathered travellers. The abbey bell has cracked. Not shattered, not fallen, cracked. The word moves through the room like a cold draught. You follow the others into the courtyard, where dawn lies grey over the stones. Rain has thinned into mist. The abbey tower rises above you, stern and damp, its upper openings dark. Near the tower door stands a cluster of monks, lay brothers, and villagers who must have come early with eggs, wool, or news. They all look upward. No one speaks loudly. A cracked bell, it seems, deserves the same hush as a sick-bed. The bell itself is hidden above, but its silence has become visible in every face. You hear whispers. Some say the crack happened during Vespers, though you remember the bell sounding sweet enough when you arrived. Others say it split in the night, without any hand on the rope, which is the sort of detail people add when they wish a story to walk farther than the truth can manage alone. Those who tell the tale never fully agree when a bell breaks. They only agree that once it does, everyone begins remembering warnings they failed to notice. A novice comes down from the tower with dust on his shoulders and terror doing its best to look like obedience. He says the crack runs along the lower rim, thin but long, and the sound, when tested softly, came out dull and wounded. The prior rebukes him for testing it at all, though not harshly. Bells are not pots. You do not simply tap them and decide whether soup may still be served. The abbot arrives leaning on a staff. He is old, with a face lined like folded parchment and eyes calm enough to make other people feel noisy. He asks for the bell ringer. The lay brother with scarred palm steps forward, the same kind of man you watched at the monastery tower before, broad-shouldered and careful. He looks ashamed, though no one has accused him. Perhaps every bell ringer feels personally responsible for bronze, wood, rope, weather, saints, sinners, and anything else foolish enough to hang above him. Some swear that a cracked bell means the parish has sinned, that an oath has been broken, that a death is coming, or that an old blessing has worn thin. Others say bronze cracks because metal tires, because casting hides flaws, because frost enters where it should not, because men ring too hard in storms, or because everything made by human hands eventually asks to be repaired. Even now, it is hard to tell whether fear seeks causes or causes become fearful after the fact. The abbey yard fills slowly. A woman from the nearby village clutches a basket of eggs under her cloak. A farmer stands with mud up to his knees, looking betrayed, as if the bell has failed a contract. A childless old couple bring a candle to the chapel, whispering that silence over the fields is unlucky for lambing. A peddler who slept in the stable claims he once heard of a cracked bell that foretold a bridge collapse. The stable boy replies that bridges collapse well enough without musical advice. Still, no one laughs much. The abbot orders that no full ringing be attempted. A messenger will be sent to the nearest town to find a founder or metal worker who understands bells. Until then, the hours will be called by a handbell in the cloister and by a brother walking the yards with a clapper. This is practical, but it does not comfort people. A handbell cannot fill fields. A clapper cannot roll across woods and wake a miller beside the stream. The great bell's silence leaves the countryside unstitched. You walk with the pilgrims beyond the abbey gate, where villagers have gathered by the road. The day brightens without sound from the tower. Smoke rises from cottages. Crows move over the fields. A woman says she woke before dawn and waited for the bell, and when it did not come, she lay still, certain for a while that she herself had died and the world had forgotten to tell her. Her neighbour says that is foolish, then admits she also waited with her hands clenched under the blanket. You remember the town bell at dusk, the monastery storm bell, the death knell in the manor hall, the market bell gathering ears, the curfew closing doors, the fire bell dragging sleepers into the street. Every fear attached to ringing has taught you its opposite. Without the bell, no one knows quite when to rise, when to gather, when to pray, when danger has passed, or when danger has begun. Silence is not freedom here. Silence is a road without milestones. Near the gate, the brown dog sniffs a fallen strip of red thread caught in the mud, perhaps from the mended cart you saw the evening before. He picks it up, worries it thoughtfully, then drops it with the grave disappointment of a scholar rejecting a poor argument. You bend to retrieve it and tie it loosely around a bare twig near the roadside, not because you truly believe it will mend anything, but because by now the gesture feels like speaking the local language of worry. The abbey handbell rings at last. It is small, clear, and brave. A brother walks across the yard, shaking it to mark the hour that the great bell cannot speak. The sound reaches you, but only barely. It fades before it crosses the first field. People turn toward it anyway. Some bow their heads. Some look more frightened than before. A cracked bell is a wounded guardian. It has not vanished, but its power has withdrawn. It makes everyone imagine fire without warning, death without a knell, curfew without command, storms without bronze resistance, and prayers that do not travel past the orchard wall. You understand then why some villages fear a broken bell almost more than a ringing one. Ringing may announce sorrow. Silence lets sorrow arrive unnamed. By late morning, you leave the Abbey Road with the pilgrims, walking toward a village said to have another church beyond the marsh. Behind you, the tower stands mute in the mist. The handbell rings once more, a faint silver note swallowed quickly by distance. The dog looks back, ears pricked, then turns forward. The road receives you again, muddy and patient. For a long while, no bell sounds at all. By the time you reach the next village, the quiet from the cracked abbey bell has followed you so long that the first sound of music feels almost startling. It comes drifting over a low rise in the road, not a bell at first, but a pipe, thin and merry, dancing above the muddy fields. Then a drum answers it, soft and uneven. Then voices. Then, at last, a church bell rings ahead, bright and whole, pouring across the village like warm water over cold hands. The pilgrims around you smile before they mean to. Even the brown dog lifts his head, ears forward, and trots more briskly, as if he has long suspected that joy is usually accompanied by fallen food. The road bends past a frozen pond, a stand of pollarded willows, and a small shrine where someone has set a candle in a clay cup. Beyond it lies the village green, crowded with people in winter cloaks, patched hoods, and the best garments they can manage. A feast day has gathered them from cottages, fields, barns, and lanes, and for once the bell is not crying fire, death, storm, court, curfew, or command. It is calling them into celebration. You enter slowly, letting the warmth of the scene unfold. The church is small, its tower square, its stones mottled with lichen. A banner hangs near the porch, painted with the image of a saint whose face is stern enough to suggest that even feast days should behave themselves. Beeswax candles burn inside the doorway, their sweet smell mixing with roasting onions, ale, wet wool, and the faint animal scent of the green. Children are kept close by older sisters and aunts, not because the day is dangerous, but because crowds have a way of swallowing small feet. A group of men raise a trestle table near the churchyard wall, while women lay out coarse bread, cheese, bowls of beans, smoked fish, and a precious dish of spiced apples saved for this very occasion. The bell rings again, not hurried now, but full and swinging. No one can quite agree whether bells sound sweeter on feast days because they are rung with lighter hearts, because the saint hears them more kindly, or because people waiting for food are generous judges of music. Whatever the reason, this bell does seem brighter. It crosses the green and settles on faces softened by relief. After the cracked silence of the abbey, its wholeness feels almost like a gift. You stand near a table where loaves are being blessed. The priest moves among the villagers, touching bread, candles, and little bundles of herbs with careful fingers. Some households have brought their finest beeswax tapers, others only small tallow stubs wrapped in cloth. A widow offers a round loaf marked with a cross cut into the crust. A young man brings a flask of ale, perhaps hoping holiness improves the brew where skill has not. The priest accepts all with the same solemn attention, which is kind because medieval piety often comes in unequal purses. Beside you, an old woman holds a small bell of her own, no bigger than a pear, tied with faded blue ribbon. She says it was once hung near a cradle to keep wandering spirits from troubling sleep. Now she carries it on Saint's Day so the blessing may freshen it. Some swear small bells tied to children, horses, or doorways can keep away the evil eye. Others say bells only attract curious goats. Even now, it is hard to tell whether protection lies in bronze, blessing, or the comfort of hearing a little sound when darkness presses too close. The feast begins after prayer. There is no grand courtly banquet, no golden platters borne by silent servants, no swan wearing its own feathers in a manner that seems unfair to everyone involved. This is village abundance, trenchers of bread, ladles of thick pottage, smoked fish divided carefully, onions soft from the pot, beans seasoned with herbs, and ale passed in cups that have known many hands. The food is plain, but the day changes it. A feast does not always mean luxury. Sometimes it means enough, shared openly, with bells overhead telling everyone that ordinary hunger may rest for an hour. You sit on a bench near the edge of the green, warming your hands around a bowl. The dog sits before you, behaving with theatrical patience. You give him a crust, and he accepts it as though confirming your moral improvement. Nearby, two pilgrims compare badges with the local man who claims to have visited a shrine 3 counties away. His badge is so polished from handling that the saint stamped upon it has become a holy blur. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether he truly made the journey or bought the badge from a cousin, but no one presses him. On feast days, even stories are allowed to wear their best cloak. A group of girls and young women lay rushes and greenery near the church porch, though the greenery is sparse in winter, mostly rosemary, ivy, and whatever has survived frost with dignity. A boy carries a candle almost as tall as his arm and looks terrified of dropping it, which is wise, because everyone in the village seems to be watching. The bell rings again as the candle is placed near the saint's image. People bow their heads for a breath. The green quiets. This is where joy keeps its unease, because even in celebration, the bell's other meanings do not disappear. The same tower that rings for the saint also rings for fever, flames, storms, curfew, and graves. The same bronze that blesses bread may tomorrow call the village to a deathbed. People know this. You can see it in the way they cross themselves when the bell begins, even while smiling. You can hear it in the little pause before laughter resumes. Medieval joy is not innocent of fear. It sits beside fear at the table and offers it bread. After the meal, a few villagers begin a simple dance on the green. The pipe plays again, bright and reedy, while the drum keeps a lazy beat. Boots stamp in soft mud. Cloaks swing. A man with a beard grey as ash tries a turn too graceful for his knees, and survives mostly through confidence. Laughter rises, soft and surprised. The priest watches from the porch with the expression of a man deciding which forms of merriment heaven can tolerate before supper. The bell sounds once more above the dance. Its note moves through pipe, drum, voices, and wind. For once, the bell does not silence the crowd, it crowns it. Yet you notice a woman at the edge of the green glance toward the western sky, where clouds are thickening beyond the trees. A farmer follows her gaze, then another. The storm bell you heard on the road lives inside them still. Celebration does not erase the weather. It merely waits with a cup of ale in hand. A peddler near the well sells ribbons, pins, little pewter saints, and tiny bells for harnesses. He rings one to amuse a group of children, then immediately tells a solemn tale of a horse saved from a marsh by such a bell, because its sound guided rescuers through fog. No one can quite agree whether the horse existed, the marsh existed, or the peddler's need for sails existed most strongly. Still, 2 farmers buy bells for their animals. Better bronze than regret, one says. As dusk nears, candles are lit along the church porch. The feast grows quieter. Bowls are scraped clean. Leftover bread is wrapped for the poor and for those who could not leave sick beds. The priest carries blessed candles back inside to be kept for storms, death watches, and dark mornings. You remember the ploughman's candle from the village church, the relic casket, the handbell, the cracked abbey tower. Everything returns. Wax, bronze, bread, fear, hope. The final feast bell rings as the first stars appear. Its sound spreads over the green, the low roofs, the muddy lane, the willow pond, the shrine with its candle, and the fields beyond. People stand still to receive it, not because they are commanded, but because the sound gathers the day and closes it gently. You feel the notes settle into your cloak, into your tired feet, into the memory of every bell before it. Here is why people loved bells. Here is why they feared them. A bell makes the unseen near. It can bring heaven close, and heaven, like storm or death or judgment, is not a small thing. When the ringing fades, you follow the pilgrims toward a barn offered for travellers, the dog pads beside you, full of crust and satisfaction. Behind you, the village returns to murmurs and candlelight. Ahead, straw waits under a roof, and somewhere above the church green, the bell hangs whole in its tower, silent for now, but carrying feast and fear together in its bronze heart. You wake in the traveller's barn before dawn, not because the bell has rung, but because the cold has found the places where your blanket is thinnest, and has made several thoughtful suggestions. Straw lies beneath you in uneven comfort. Somewhere nearby, one of the pilgrims snores in small, respectful bursts, as if trying not to disturb the saints. The brown dog is curled against your knees again, warm as a loaf just pulled from the oven, and for once you are willing to admit he has earned his keep. The feast village sleeps outside. Its music has faded, its bowls have been washed, its candles pinched or carried into the church, and the green where boots stamped in muddy circles now lies still under a pale glaze of frost. The smell of last night's smoke lingers in your cloak. So does the sweetness of beeswax and spiced apples, faint but real, a small memory tucked into wool. You lie still and listen. No bell sounds yet. The hour before dawn belongs to watchers, restless sleepers, sick beds, and those who have business with ovens, animals, or fear. In the barn, a horse shifts behind a wooden partition. A hen clucks once, offended by a dream. Rain from the day before has frozen in little beads along the lower edge of the door. Beyond the planks, the wind moves softly over the yard, making the thatch whisper. You rise carefully, because medieval barns are full of objects waiting to bruise an unwary shin. A flail leans near the wall, bundles of hay hang from pegs, a stack of hurdles stands beside a barrel. Someone has tied a sprig of rosemary and a strip of red thread to the door latch, perhaps left from the feast blessing, perhaps placed there by the farmer's wife to keep sickness from the animals. Some swear that rosemary remembers the prayers spoken over it. Others say it keeps moths away, which, in a house full of wool, may be nearly as holy. You step outside. The cold takes your breath at once. The yard is dim and silvered. Frost lies on barrels, cart shafts, fence rails, and the backs of 2 sleepy cattle. The village roofs crouch beneath the dark sky, each house holding a hidden ember under ash. The church tower rises beyond the green, black against the stars. No torch burns there yet, but you can just make out the belfry openings like hollow eyes in the stone. A watchman stands near the churchyard gate. He has a lantern in one hand and a staff in the other. his cloak wrapped so tightly around him that he looks less like a man than a bundle of laundry given civic responsibility. You recognize the crooked badge on his cap. Perhaps it is the same watchman from town, or perhaps every watchman in this region has been issued the same tired expression by law. He nods when you approach, then looks back toward the tower. "Waiting for matins," he says. You stand with him, because the road has taught you that bells are best understood by those who must wait for them. The dog appears beside you after a moment, yawning widely, then sits on your boot. Across the green, the last feast ribbons stir in the wind. A candle burns low in the roadside shrine, its flame cupped behind cloudy horn. The air smells of frost, old smoke, cattle, and wet earth hardening under cold. The watchman tells you the bell ringer is late. No one can quite agree whether a late bell ringer is merely a sleepy man or a sign that the morning has caught its cloak on some unseen nail. The watchman says this with a dry mouth and eyes fixed on the tower. In villages where bells rule the hours, even a small delay feels like a loose stone in a bridge. The monks at great houses may have orderly clocks of prayer, but here, one man with cold hands and a rope holds the border between night and day. A faint shape moves at last near the church porch. A door opens. A man crosses the yard carrying a lantern low. He is old but broad, with a wool cap pulled over his ears and a short cloak belted at the waist. The watchman exhales. This is the ringer. He climbs the tower stair slowly, vanishing behind the little door. You imagine the narrow steps spiralling upward, worn in the middle by generations of feet. You imagine the smell inside dust, bird droppings, cold stone, old rope, dry wood, bronze, and the faint sourness of trapped weather. The village remains silent. Then, from inside the tower, comes a small sound that is not the bell, the rope shifting, a beam creaking, the bell's frame waking above. The dog's ears lift. The watchman crosses himself. You find your own hand moving, perhaps from belief, perhaps from habit borrowed along the road. Some swear that the moment before the first bell is when ghosts are nearest to leaving the fields and finding their graves again. Others say the dead are peaceful enough, and it is the living who cause most dawn trouble. Even now, it is hard to tell whether such beliefs come from fear of darkness or from the simple strangeness of standing in a sleeping village while one hidden man prepares to make the sky speak. The bell rings. The first stroke falls down through the tower, round and deep, and spreads across the frost. It moves over roofs, through shutter cracks, along the frozen pond, across the green where last night's dance has left churned mud hardened into ridges. A second stroke follows, then a third. The sound is not frantic, not mournful, not commanding like court or curfew. It is the bell before dawn, calling prayer, waking hearths, reminding bodies that the night has loosened its grip. In the houses, people begin to stir. A shutter opens. Smoke thickens from one roof as embers are coaxed back into flame. A woman steps out to fetch water, her pail knocking softly against her knee. Somewhere a baby complains at being included in mourning. A man coughs behind a door. The village returns to itself by degrees, all because bronze has spoken. You stand through the ringing until the last note fades into the fields. The watchman lowers his lantern. Good, he murmurs, as though the bell has passed a test. Perhaps it has. After the cracked silence of the abbey, this ordinary dawn peal feels like a blessing that does not need to announce itself as one. The tower is whole. The ringer is alive. No flames rise or no storm presses. No death knell follows. For now, the bell simply gives the morning back to the village. The ringer descends after a while, rubbing his hands together. His palms are wrapped in strips of linen darkened by grease. He nods to the watchman and to you, then notices the dog. From his pouch he produces a crumb of hard bread and gives it over without ceremony. This confirms the dog's long-held belief that all official systems eventually produce snacks. You walk with the watchman toward the church porch, where the priest has opened the door for early prayer. Inside, the air is cold and smells of stone, candle wax, and yesterday's feast greenery. The blessed candles stand near the altar, their wicks trimmed. The saint's banner hangs motionless. A few villagers kneel in the dimness, shoulders bowed under cloaks. You do not stay long, but you stand near the back, letting the quiet settle after the bell. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether bells frighten people more in the dark or comfort them more at dawn. Perhaps the answer depends on whether the sound calls you from warmth, warns you from danger, or tells you that danger has not come. In this hour, the bell feels less like a threat than a hand on the shoulder, firm, cold, necessary, but not unkind. When you step outside again, the eastern sky has paled. The road beyond the village waits under mist. Frost shines along the hedges. The watchman moves toward the last lane of his round. The bell ringer disappears into a cottage where smoke has begun to rise. Behind a shutter, someone laughs softly, and the sound is so ordinary that it feels almost precious. You gather your cloak, thank the farmer's wife for the barn, and accept a piece of coarse bread wrapped in cloth for the road. The dog looks at it with immediate professional interest. You tell him this is not entirely for him. He does not appear convinced. As you leave the green, the church tower stands behind you in the growing light. Its bell is silent now, but the silence is gentle, not broken. The morning has heard its name and answered. Ahead, fields open into mist, and somewhere beyond them another bell may be waiting, holding one more note for one more traveller under the slowly brightening sky. You leave the village just as the sun lifts over the far fields, pale and slow, laying a thin wash of gold across frost, hedges, and the rutted road ahead. Behind you, the church tower grows smaller with each step, its square shape softened by morning mist. The bell inside is quiet now, but its dawn voice stays with you, not as a sound exactly, more as a warmth beneath the ribs, a memory of bronze crossing cold air and telling a village that night has ended. The brown dog walks beside you, unusually dignified, though this may be because he is watching the cloth-wrapped bread in your hand with the solemn attention of a tax collector. You break off a corner and give it to him. He accepts it as his rightful portion, and immediately forgives the entire world. The road bends past the frozen pond, the shrine with its guttering candle, and the last cottages where smoke rises from roofs in thin blue lines. A woman throws washwater into a ditch and calls a greeting. A man with a mattock over his shoulder trudges toward a field, already leaning into the day before the day has properly begun. Soon the village falls behind. Open country spreads before you, fields rimmed with white, bare orchards, low barns, distant woods, and the silver thread of a river moving under mist. Your boots find the old rhythm of travel. Mud takes hold, lets go, takes hold again. The cloak around your shoulders is stiff at the hem from dried rain and smoke. Somewhere in its folds linger the smells of the whole journey guesthouse ale, beeswax candles, wet wool, pottage, ash from the fire lane, damp straw, cold stone, and the faint sweetness of feast day apples. No one can quite agree whether a road remembers those who walk it. Some swear that repeated footsteps leave more than prints. that pilgrim paths grow holy because longing itself settles into the dust. Others say a road is only mud, stone, frost, and inconvenience arranged in a line. Even now, it is hard to tell which is truer. As you walk, the road seems full of echoes, the gate bell at dusk, the monastery bell measuring the hours, the market bell calling tolls and warnings, the storm bell battling black clouds, the death knell moving through the manor hall, the relic handbell trembling near wax and bone, the curfew bell closing streets, the fire bell tearing sleepers from their blankets, the manor bell summoning tenants, the pilgrim bells fading through woods, the cracked bell's silence, the feast bell bright above bread, and the dawn bell giving morning back to the world. They have all followed you here. At the crest of a small rise, you stop and look back. The village tower is only a dark notch beyond the hedges now. Farther still, though you cannot see them, lie the abbey, the manor green, the town wall, the smoky guest house, the market square, and the broken cartwheel that vanished from the ditch. Somewhere, the suspicious monk may be bending over parchment with ink-stained fingers, copying careful lines while the hour bell moves him from one duty to another. Somewhere. The merchant with the figs is likely arguing over a price with the wounded dignity of a man oppressed by mathematics. Somewhere, the bell ringer with scarred palms is rubbing grease into his hands, waiting for the next pull of the rope. The dog sits beside you and looks back too, though he is probably remembering crusts more than theology. A faint bell sounds from behind you. It may be the village you left. It may be another chapel hidden by mist. It may be only memory caught in the morning wind. The note is soft, almost too distant to trust, but it crosses the fields and reaches you as a single, gentle thread. You do not feel the sharp fear you felt at dusk by the first gate, when the tower loomed over a strange town and every peal seemed to carry command. You understand more now. Fear of bells in this world is not foolishness, not simply superstition, not merely peasants trembling at bronze. It is the fear of being summoned by forces larger than the self-God, Lord, storm, fire, sickness, death, duty, community, and time. A bell means you are not alone, which is comforting. A bell means you cannot pretend to be alone, which is frightening. You walk down the far side of the rise. The river mist thickens along the low ground, and the road becomes soft. Frost melts on the grass, leaving beads of water that catch the new light. A wayside cross stands near a bend, its stone worn smooth by rain. At its base, someone has left a little knot of red thread, a candle stub, and a pilgrim badge bent almost flat. Those who tell the tale never fully agree whether such offerings ask for protection, give thanks for survival, or simply mark the place where a tired person stopped and hoped. You touch the cold stone briefly as you pass. Beyond the cross, the river runs beside the road. Its surface is dark and slow under veils of mist. Reeds stir at the bank. A heron lifts itself from the shallows with careful wings, and for a few breaths, all the world seems to move without hurry. No shouting market, no court roll, no fire alarm, no thunder, no death knell, only water, breath, frost, and the soft pad of the dog's paws in mud. Then another bell sounds ahead. This one is farther away, across the river perhaps, from a tower hidden behind trees. It rings once, then again, calling some other household, some other village, some other set of cold hands toward prayer, work, bread, or worry. You do not know its meaning. That is part of its power. Every bell begins as a mystery until the people around it reveal whether to kneel, run, gather, mourn, pay, close the shutters, or simply keep walking. You keep walking. The morning widens. A cart approaches from the opposite direction, its wheels creaking, its driver wrapped in a fur-lined cloak patched at the shoulder. Bundles of firewood are tied behind him. A tiny harness bell jingles near the horse's neck, bright and harmless, though the horse looks deeply unconvinced by the road. The driver nods to you, notices the dog, and tosses a small heel of bread into the mud. The dog retrieves it at once, proving that even after a journey through holy fear, earthly blessings remain important. You pass the cart and follow the river bend, leaving towers behind and moving toward whatever village waits beyond the next field. The last bell fades at your back. It does not vanish. It settles into the morning with the other sounds: water, wheels, crows, breath, and the quiet rhythm of your own steps. And so you carry the bells with you, not as terror alone, and not as comfort alone, but as the voice of a world where every sound matters because every danger is close, every hope is fragile, and every day must be rung into being. The road grows softer now, and your steps slow without needing to be told. The fields on either side lie pale beneath the morning, no longer sharp with frost, only damp and silver, breathing mist upward as the sun warms the low places. The dog walks more quietly beside you. His ears rest low. His paws press small dark marks into the mud, and even he seems to understand that the journey is settling towards stillness. Behind you, the last bell is gone. Ahead, no tower calls. There is only the river moving under its veil, the reeds whispering faintly, the distant creak of a cart fading into another lane, and the small sound of your cloak brushing against your knees. You no longer need to know whether the next bell means prayer, danger, curfew, fire, death, feast, court, storm, or dawn. For this moment, no summons reaches you. Nothing asks you to hurry. Nothing asks you to answer. You find a dry place beneath a willow and sit for a while with your back against the cool trunk. The bread is nearly gone. The dog curls at your feet, nose tucked beneath his tail, finally satisfied with the laws of the world. Across the river, the mist loosens from the fields in slow white threads. Sunlight touches the water gently, not bright enough to dazzle, only enough to show that the night has truly passed. The medieval world softens around you. The towers sink into distance. The smoky halls grow quiet. The rushes lie still on stone floors. The beeswax candles burn low in chapels you no longer need to enter. The bell ropes hang unmoving in shadowed towers, waiting for other hands, other mornings, other fears. For now, you're warm enough, you're safe enough. The road can wait, the bells can sleep,